Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the program Business Time, a magazine program in which we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. And my name is William Kumwembe. In the program today, World Bank sees Malawi economy picking up in the next few years thanks to projected enhancement in activities in the economy. And also in the program, experts see macadamia nuts being the next big thing for the local economy. We have these and other stories. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome. This is Business Time, and in our main story in the program today, the World Bank sees the local economy picking up in the short to medium terms as there are anticipated increased activity in the economy. This is contained in the World Bank's Malawi Economic Monitor, which was launched on Tuesday in Blantyre. According to the World Bank country manager, Hugh Riddle, there is much hope now that the economy would see more activities thanks to, among other things, the recent International Monetary Fund IMF extended credit facility program, which Malawi got in November 2023. We spoke with Riddle in this interview.
Now we've been here in Blantyre to launch the 18th edition. It's called Turning a Corner ? So the MAM is split into two parts. The first part looks at the macroeconomic picture that Malawi's in right now and asks that question: are we seeing any changes in the macroeconomic picture, particularly given the major reform efforts that were delivered at the end of last year? The country's moved on to an ECF program with the IMF. We've restarted budget support from the World Bank side. What are the impacts on daily lives for most Malawians? The second part of the story is about watersheds and the role that watersheds play in Malawi's economy for communities, but also for the wider economic picture. We have actually already seen an expansion in the safety net for Malawians, and I think over the last 3 years that's been a very appropriate measure, given the hardships that have come from the poly-crisis of COVID, 3 major cyclones, food insecurity, cholera, and a macroeconomic shock. So if we had not invested heavily in creating a good safety net for Malawians, we would have really failed Malawians. So we as the World Bank are proud to be part of that. But we've also changed the nature of the safety net a little bit. It's not just a social cash transfer now. It's also a public works scheme linked to watersheds and climate resilience. And that means that communities are coming together and taking their own destiny into their hands, fixing the problems locally that they see. And that's I think bringing a new vibrancy to that safety net mechanism. And we've also brought all of the donors together under one platform to finance the safety net, which means that government's now in charge of a wider national safety net, not the donors. The donors have pooled their resources. So I think we're seeing good progress on the safety net, and that's the right thing to be doing now. Of course, over time, we need to see a reduction in the caseload of people on protection and an increase in production in this country. Production so that we can see the country exporting more for hard currency, which is also going to help on the macroeconomic picture. So we need to see a graduation pathway from social protection into the productive activities. Debt reduction is a critical part of the ECF program with the IMF. Remember that the IMF program covers a period of 4 years. So the key question is government going to be committed over that full 4-year period to pursuing these multiple goals, including reducing debt? How do you reduce debt? Partly through restructuring efforts. Those have been initiated, as you mentioned, with some of the bilaterals, also with some of the multilaterals externally on the external debt side. On the domestic debt side, we've seen big increases over the past decade or so of domestic debt build-up. And that's a result of fiscal management. Fiscal management meaning you pass a budget, but then there's a big deficit that needs to be financed. And that's becoming an acute issue for Malawi. And that's why so much of the problem rests on the implementation of public finance management, and why we in the World Bank are so focused on IFMIS commitment controls, which means that MDAs in the government don't get into contracts before they know that they've actually got the money. We haven't seen IFMIS implemented in the past. Now IFMIS is rolling out to all MDAs. So the big question is government going to be committed to actually implement IFMIS, to implement the commitment control systems in the budget expenditure. That's going to have a big impact on fiscal, but also debt.
Bachan Cheleni is the Secretary to the Treasury and says the government is optimistic that the trajectory it has recorded this far would be sustained.
I need to make sure that people understand out there that we are not restructuring domestic debt. We are not going to restructure domestic debt. Banks, financial institutions in Malawi, they must understand that. What we are restructuring is the foreign debt. Why? It's because we have to pay in FX. So when you are paying in FX, it becomes to be a problem when you are not exporting enough or when you are not earning enough in FX. So what we are actually working on is to restructure mostly the foreign debt, and we're doing quite well in that area. We have done a number of things which I don't want to diverge because they're not public yet. It's contractual issues, so you don't just say anyhow. You see, for sustainability, you should not go beyond 60% for sustainability, but you understand that it has come to that level because of the FX realignment. When we realigned our kwacha, it meant that the same US dollar debt has become more because you are now doing it at 1,700 kwacha to the dollar. So that's why it has come to that level, to 12.8 trillion kwacha. But the good thing is that we are doing two things which are quite important. Number one is that we are rationalizing our revenue collection, and number two is that we are looking at issues of exports as well. But also, not just that, even in terms of exports, we are focusing on production. We're not focusing on ORT. If you look at the budget that we have just produced, we're saying that yes, there's a deficit, but we have taken down that deficit to 1.4 trillion, which is a kind of a miracle because the IMF were expecting us to go at around 1.645 trillion, but we are at 1.4 trillion. That's quite a miracle on its own. To get to that figure, you need to consider revenue rationalization, but also look at issues of expenditure. Then you are getting somewhere. When you have a deficit, it's not that you're not balancing the budget. I think it's very important for people to understand. Balancing the budget does not mean that what comes in comes out. No, it's about what are you doing with the deficit. If you look at all our ORTs, our revenue collection is going to meet about 90% of that, which means that the budget is giving us a room of just about 10% for us to go into investments and or development and or production. That's why we are saying no, we can't be a country which does not enter into mega farms. We can't be a country which does not enter into water provision, for example. So let's borrow for that, because that is investment. We are sure that we are going to pay back when we enter into mining. We're sure that we're going to pay back when we enter into those mega farms. So we're not borrowing for ORT. This is a very important thing for people to understand. We are not borrowing for ORT. We're not borrowing for salaries. No. We are borrowing for production. Well, yes, monetarists believe that it's inflationary. I also think it's inflationary, but it's inflationary because the production side is not producing. If you have a lot of money, but there is production, why should you worry? You shouldn't worry, really. So the challenge that we are having is that people are given those social cash transfers, but there may be no maize for them to buy. There may be no soap for them to buy. So what do? You make sure that you produce the soap in the country. You make sure that the maize is available. When the maize is available, when the soap is available, then there's going to be no problem with those cash transfers. We must protect the vulnerable people. We must protect them. So it is not the problem of government in that instance. It is the problem of the private sector, because the private sector should say, there are people here who need soap for them to bath because they do have some money. They need, maybe it's maize, maybe they need whatever they need. There's what you call effective demand. The private sector should come in to make sure that the effective demand is being met. How do you meet that? Produce. So take advantage. So our people are not taking advantage to enter into production. They want to rush into another country to buy the commodities to sell them here. This is where now the Reserve Bank is coming in with the tightening of the monetary situation. Why do you tight? Because you don't want people to have too much money to go and buy the commodities. You are tightening for that particular reason, which in a way is also stifling the same aspects of production, because when you want to produce, you want to go to the bank to borrow money, you find it's expensive, then the vicious circle continues. So that's why government has come in to say that let's see if we can break this vicious cycle somewhere. Where do we do that? Production. So the mega farms have been provided or allocated with quite some resources, because when you produce and food inflation goes down, inflation is going to go down, then we can begin to manufacture.
The International Labour Organization has held strides Malawi is recording in ending child labor, especially in the tea industry. Malawi is seen as a model for many other countries within the region and is one of the key growers of tea in the continent. Our journalist Kumwembe has the whole story.
ILO Chief Technical Advisor for Accelerating Action for the Elimination of Child Labor Excel Project in Supply Chains in Africa, Minoru Ogasawara, said Malawi has made impressive progress in the fight against child labor in the tea value chain.
No, I must say this is really impressive, I think, progress. Especially this time we are looking at the fight against child labor in the tea supply chain. And I must say that the efforts being made by stakeholders in Malawi, especially by governments, workers' organizations, employers' organizations, but also Tea Association of Malawi, really impressive. Looking at really different level of interventions to eliminate child labor in supply chain. So I must really congratulate their efforts. To me, I think the progress is really impressive. So as far as like tea, child labor in the tea is concerned, we are really progressing. So I think the issue is really raising awareness, especially among people working in the informal economy setting. So that's where I think is a still challenge, reaching out in terms of awareness, but also in terms of law enforcement. So, but also that those people living in vulnerable conditions. I think if we can really bring efforts together to really reach out these really people working in the lower tiers of tea supply chain, I think we are very close to eliminate child labor in the tea supply chain in Malawi. There are a lot of lessons we can learn from Malawi, especially I think the efforts of, for example, Tea Association of Malawi. I think really looking into really outgrowers. I think this is something very powerful example of really, supporting those who are not necessarily part of the formal economy. I think this is a really very important lesson to learn, and also, for example, workers, like through MCTU, they are trying to organize those workers, tea workers, at the lower tiers of tea supply chain. I think this really giving a collective voice for workers to really raise kind of their voice against like child labor is really very important, good experience we can learn from Malawi. As far as tea is concerned, they are quite, Malawi, I must say, quite ahead in terms of the elimination of child labor. But perhaps in terms of improving further the productivity of tea, for example, I would say Kenya should be a little bit ahead than Malawi. So I think this is something also how to improve the productivity of the tea, farmers. I think this is something also we can learn from other countries.
Kenya's Deputy Labour Commissioner in the Ministry of Labour and Social Protection, Christe Otieno, says Malawi offers vast lessons to tea-producing countries.
The visit is important because as Kenya, we are now joining the second phase of the ILO Excel project, and Kenya will learn so much from Malawi because Malawi has been in the first phase, and most of the activities will be similar because we are engaging in the tea and the coffee sector value chains. So it was important that we also join the visit, although we are now at the initial stages when we want to start the implementation of the project. The lessons we have drawn is Malawi has a strong involvement of the associations in the tea and the coffee sector. There is also a strong involvement of the traditional leaders, the chiefs, and also the groups, the village groups, the mother groups, and also from the workers and the employers' organizations.
Employers Conservative Association of Malawi Communications and Projects Officer Ellen Ziwoyapiri said raising awareness among members and employers remains key in fighting the vice.
As employers, what we have done during the Excel project is to make sure that we raise awareness among our members and all employers in all sectors, whereby we have developed the employer's guide as well as code of conduct, just to ensure that compliance within our members as well as employers in Malawi is enhanced, whereby at the same time we are encouraging employers to see child labor as a business case, because now it affects our international markets as well as infringes the rights of children. Currently, as Malawi, what we are doing together with the social partners, the government as well as the workers, we are trying our best to ensure that all employers as well as all the stakeholders that have the capability to ensure that the awareness is raised, because mostly it's about mindset change, including our culture, whereby most things we don't see them as child labor. So we are starting with, we are not leaving everyone behind in as long as fighting child labor is concerned.
Secretary for Labor Wezi Kaira lamented Malawi's removal in the second phase of the Excel Africa project after numerous interventions were lined up and some not completed. Information available on ILO website indicates that child labor continues to be a challenge in Malawi, where 2.12 million children, representing 38% of all children aged between 5 and 17, are engaged in child labor.
Remember, you're watching Business Time, a magazine program in which we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. And my name is William Kumwembe. We'll be right back, and when we get back, we look at prospects for increased production and exports for macadamia in the country. That's when we come back inside Business Time. Welcome back. This is Business Time, a magazine program in which we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. And moving on with the program, Malawi has been an agrarian economy for quite some time, but value and volume of agriculture produce has been dwindling, consequently affecting the contribution of the sector to the gross domestic product. Tobacco has for so long been the mainstay of the economy, raking in more forex than the rest of the crops that the country produces. But experts see macadamia as the next big thing in as far as export revenue is concerned. This was said in Lilongwe when experts visited one of the macadamia production sites in Namitete in the district. Yakosa Tea is team leader for the Minister of Agriculture Mega Farms Support Unit and explains the rationale behind the thinking that macadamia could be the next big thing.
Very much. Growth pause is very important coming into what we're already doing in Malawi. Basically, it's piloting what we're looking at, the anchoring model. Last year you heard about the launch, which the President, Dr. Lazarus Chakwera, launched on 31st of August last year. That was about the Mega Anchor Farms program. So we're looking at the smallholders farmers that are producing at a low scale. They should be anchored by the mega farmers, and the produce will be aggregated so that they can able to find a market. So the growth pool is coming in. It's an answer from our side because we're looking at the development partners that are linking up with the private partners. For sure, you know, in the Malawi Vision 2063, the government is focusing much on the private sector, that they are part of the preparing models for the economic development of this particular country. So growth pause is very important on our side. Employment, women and youth will be employed in the macadamia farming. There will be high production of the macadamia, so that will increase the exportation. So we'll not be complaining much about the forex anymore when we increase the macadamia production.
Among the delegates was Siemens Ogride, who is the island ambassador to Malawi. Ogride feels Malawi has vast potential to enhance production and output of various commodities, including macadamia, and if effort is deployed accordingly, the country could make the most of the sector.
Part of our overall approach in Malawi to try and grow the Malawi economy, to support the government's plan for 2063. As you know, the government places a big emphasis on growing agro-processing, the agriculture and food sector. Macadamia represents a good opportunity for Malawi to diversify, to promote exports, and that will help to grow the economy as well as helping farmers at local level and also create local employment. So, I take that figure because you can see this morning we saw everything that's involved from growing the nuts to processing. All of this creates employment. So there's no reason why Malawi can't have plenty of employment, not just around macadamia nuts, but around other products. And we developed a very successful export-oriented agricultural sector in Ireland, creating huge amounts of jobs at rural level exactly by this model.
And USAID Acting Deputy Mission Director is Jupiter Jones and says there is more that needs to be done, especially in capacitating local producers for the product to be competitive on the international market.
So our role is to provide evidence on whether a smallholder farmer can indeed adopt macadamia in their production. So we are here to first of all bring in the expertise and collaborate with Galamax as a private sector entity to be able to answer to that question. How can a smallholder farmer benefit from adoption of macadamia as a potential crop for them? And on the other hand, we are also bringing in the aspect of the youth in it. And as a university, we continually work on our curricula and how we get to support the sector by also enhancing our teaching methods. So we are also involved in experientially growing the macadamia itself in conjunction with our students and our staff members. Well, we need to be able to capacitate them. So instead of just getting them in class and teaching them that this is how macadamia grows, just like you teach a child, they literally have to do it. So that's one way in which they are getting involved. And in this way, it's not only the youth that have been selected to Luana in the program for Luana, but we are also engaging the youth within the communities so that they can also get to see the value in it. And maybe they can indeed grow it on their own. So that's how they are getting involved, besides, well, being capacitated through the enhanced curriculum.
Well, that story also brings us to the end of today's edition of the program Business Time, a magazine program in which we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. On behalf of the entire production team, my name is William Kumwembe, but always remember, if it doesn't make money, then it doesn't make sense. Stay safe and goodbye for now.